Lesson 1. Early British Rule and the Fortress Economy. In the MATSEC Advanced Matriculation History syllabus, the modern colonial period of Malta begins around the year 1800. This is the year French forces surrendered following a popular uprising and a British-supported blockade, marking the start of continuous British civil administration. During the early 19th century, British rule profoundly reshaped Malta into a fortress economy. As a vital naval and military repair base designed to serve imperial Mediterranean strategy, the islands relied heavily on infrastructure investments, like dockyard extensions, harbor development, and military works. This military economy was deeply influenced by external conflicts. The Napoleonic Wars, continental blockade dynamics, and later unrest like the Greek War of Independence brought fluctuating wartime demand and commerce to the Mediterranean. As the fortress and service sectors grew, traditional local industries suffered. Most notably, the traditional local cotton industry experienced a severe decline. This contraction forced the Maltese workforce to depend even more heavily on base-related employment. Despite the new jobs, Malta remained densely populated with limited land and resources. This chronic population pressure meant there were simply not enough jobs for the growing population. As a result, demographic growth encouraged a structural long-term response of overseas migration, with many Maltese leaving the densely inhabited islands to seek opportunities elsewhere.
Lesson 2. Language, Politics, and Constitutional Reform. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, Maltese politics were dominated by the language question. This was a fierce competition among Italian, English, and increasingly the Maltese vernacular for dominance in administration, law, education, and public life. The language of instruction in schools was explosive because it decided which cultural identity would prevail and who would get access to jobs in the church, law, or imperial service. Italian was historically the language of culture and elite politics, while English represented the British Empire and modern opportunity. Political formations like the nationalist current of Fortunato Mizzi and reform currents of Sigismondo Savona and Gerald Strickland organized heavily around this conflict of language and loyalty to Britain versus Italian cultural orientation. Factional politics frequently played out in the colonial press, prompting authorities to use restrictive ordinances and censorship. Tensions over economic hardship, high food prices after the First World War, and political frustration erupted during the Sette Giugno riots of 7 June 1919. British troops fired on the protesting crowds, leaving several dead. This crisis intensified demands for constitutional reform, which British governments historically evaluated using royal commissions. The momentum from Sette Giugno ultimately produced the 1921 Amory-Milner Constitution. This settlement granted Malta responsible self-government in defined internal affairs, though Britain retained imperial control over defense and key reserved matters under a diarchical framework.
Lesson 3. Post-war Malta, Independence, and the Church. Following the Second World War, Malta faced urgent reconstruction needs due to heavy bombing and the Second Great Siege. The 1947 Constitution restored responsible self-government, reopening ministerial politics. By the 1950s, a major political debate emerged over the island's future. Dom Mintoff's labor leadership proposed an integration policy, aiming to make Malta a fully integrated part of the United Kingdom, seeking representation and social benefits comparable to UK standards. However, this proposal ultimately failed amid political and religious conflict. Independence became the dominant path, leading to Malta becoming an independent state in 1964, and later a republic in 1974. These milestones reflect a shift from colonial and defense-based dependence towards sovereign statehood. Malta's politico-religious conflicts were also central to this era. In the 1960s, intense tensions erupted between the labor leadership and the Catholic hierarchy over political morality, interdict, and electoral influence. Church-state clashes continued into the 1980s over church schools, property, and institutional power under a reforming labor government. It was not until the Vatican-Maltese Agreements of 1991 to 1993 that these outstanding institutional and financial issues were finally settled. Meanwhile, Malta's transition away from a military economy accelerated. The 1956 Suez Crisis and subsequent British defense rundown threatened dockyard jobs, intensifying the need for economic diversification. The era of the British military base officially ended with its closure in 1979, completing a long evolution toward full sovereignty and eventual European integration.
Lesson 4. 19th-Century European Nationalism. The MATSEC syllabus also covers major European historical shifts, starting with the French Revolution of 1789. This monumental event began as a fiscal and political crisis of the Ancien Regime, which quickly escalated into a States General politics and popular revolution. Following the revolution, the Napoleonic Empire reshaped Europe through military conquest, the creation of satellite kingdoms, and sweeping legal and administrative reforms, such as the introduction of the Civil Code. After Napoleon's final defeat, the major powers of Austria, Russia, Prussia, Britain, and France formed the Concert of Europe in 1815. This was a system of great power cooperation designed to manage diplomatic disputes, preserve the conservative order after the Vienna settlement, and contain the threat of future revolutions. However, this conservative post-1815 settlement was repeatedly challenged. The syllabus groups together the revolution waves of 1830 and 1848, because both periods saw widespread liberal, national, and social demands erupting across multiple European states. Nationalism also drove major territorial changes later in the century. Italian unification, or the Risorgimento, combined the statecraft and diplomacy of Cavour for Piedmont Sardinia with the popular military campaigns of Garibaldi in the south. This produced the Kingdom of Italy in 1861 and later secured Rome in 1870. Meanwhile, German unification was achieved under Prussian leadership. The statesman Otto von Bismarck orchestrated a series of wars against Denmark, Austria, and France that culminated in the proclamation of the German Empire in 1871.
Thanks for watching. For free practice questions, study guides, and flashcards, visit exampreprise.com. Good luck on your exam!